Welcome back to another episode of Latinas Empowering Latinas. I'm so excited to share something special with you today. I was invited to guest on the Perimenopause Simplified podcast hosted by my good friend Claudia, who is a functional health coach, integrative nutrition coach, and the creator of the Hormone Rescue Program. I'm sharing a special excerpt of the amazing conversation we had where we dove deep about the power of culture and how my roots shape not just my hustle, but my heart. I opened up about what it really takes to run multiple businesses as a Latina, the importance of boundaries because, mija, we all need them, balancing ambition with family and self-care, and how I've redefined success on my own terms. So grab your favorite cafecito and settle in for this behind-the-scenes look at my story, my hustle, and my why.
Janessa, you are one of the hardest working women that I know.
Does it appear that way? I may have been fooled though.
We're going to get into it. So let's just dive in. How do you think that your upbringing and your culture has affected your work ethic and your success?
Oh my gosh. I had no idea until I became an entrepreneur. And actually, ironically, when I started my podcast, that I come from a long line of entrepreneurs on my dad's side. I had no idea.
Wow.
And I think it's I think we're kind of somehow fabricated. I don't think everybody's made to be an entrepreneur at all, because you have to have I always tell people we're cut from a different cloth. I really believe that you have to have a certain amount of creativity and risk-taking and adventure and being okay with not having consistency or structure. But it also comes with a lot of freedom and opportunity. And not everybody's willing to risk that way. So that's the first thing, I think. And I would say culturally, so the Cuban background, I mean, just from what I saw, at least, I come from really, really hardworking people. What you hear and what you see are the same. So there's no like, oh, they said one thing, but they're doing another. It's just sad, but just like my uncle, my grandfather, everybody died. Like they kept working until they died. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's what I saw and what I heard. My dad is in his 60s, still working, has no plans to retire anytime soon. My grandfather, I think, worked till he was 95. And it wasn't until he started having dementia that his job had to say, they called my mom and my aunt and said, we're so sorry, we love him, but it's a danger to him and to our people. Like he was driving little golf carts in a park in Miami, he wasn't driving anybody around, but he was driving around the park doing things.
Yeah.
But he used to tell my grandmother, the day that I retire, I die. And within he declined.
Yeah.
Something else on that too. And the women part of this is it's almost worn like a badge of honor. Like I work until the day I give birth. Do you know how some people take off a few days and stuff? Like my mom worked till she gave birth, my grandmother. So I literally went to work, got home, took a nap, thank God it was the summer, and then my water broke and I worked that day. But that's ingrained in us. So, the therapist in me is very aware how that's not healthy culture.
Right.
In fact, one of my things is life is short, live now, and you never know when something's going to happen. I said the American culture, and I'm American, I realize that when I say it, but in the American culture, we work so hard to be able to enjoy retirement. What about the people that never make it to retire? Like you're killing yourself to be able to relax. Listen to the irony in that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but it was a loaded one. Insofar as I think that's where it comes, so you had said you work, in the beginning, I work so hard. I do. And maybe it's, I don't realize that I do, but there's a lot of things that I put into place about quality versus quantity. When you said, how do you balance and how do you find time for everything? It's prioritizing. Like, what are your priorities? What are your priorities? And then reestablishing those priorities. And I'm a huge fan of time blocking. And I know what works for me. And I tell all my clients when I'm working with them, I can tell you what works for me, but I can't give you the solution for what works for you. You need to figure that out. So I know what makes me feel full and whole, but all of that's up to you.
Success is defined differently to each person. There's not one right way to do anything. And I think that especially in our perimenopausal years, a lot of us self-reflect and think about what what is success to me? And when I say you're a hard worker, I just know historically, I've known you now for years that you were a hard worker. You know, my sister and Janessa went to school together. So in school, she was a hard worker, and, you know, you have your own practice. You do a lot. So it looks like that from the outside, and I would venture to say a lot of people think the same of me. And yes, but I also have really solid boundaries. So I was going to ask this later, but maybe we can talk about that right now, because you just mentioned even time blocking. Like, what does that mean? What does that look like for you? Like, what's a typical schedule for you?
It's time blocking, for those that don't know, is looking at your calendar and purposely blocking out days and times in your calendar to do what you feel is most important. So most people just kind of scatter through, really aren't thinking about their days or their times, and they just get things done. So what it is about intentionally mapping out your week, kind of like a puzzle, if you want it. So my puzzle, it took me a long time to get here. I used to work 6 days a week. I used to work full time out of school. And then after school, I used to go work at a nonprofit until about 9 o'clock at night, because I was working on my hours, and I wanted to work on my hours because I knew I wanted my own business. Mm-hmm. And then the second I finished those hours, I was like, here's my 2 weeks notice. And I'm putting up my shingle as soon as I pass my test. And then I went from my full-time to my practice, but it felt differently because it was on my terms. So I went from 6 days a week, 2 jobs. And I think I've always kind of had my dad kind of raises, my brother too has more than one job all the time.
True definition of an entrepreneur.
Yes. It's so interesting because yes. And we're always thinking of something. Mm-hmm. So I have my practice and I have my coaching, and then I kind of like branched off. I don't think we talked about this. You mentioned Latinas a lot of times, but that's essentially a third business.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I own 3 businesses at this point. We're in 3 businesses. It's crazy, but I love it. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So 6 days. Now I work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's it. So every week I have 4-day weekends. And before people think, you're jealous, how do you do that? Yeah, right. The days, and you said it before we started recording, the days that I'm working, I am working. So probably not the best according to like a health nutritionist, functional medicine person, because I cortisol out, right? At that point, for 3 days. I try really hard. Like there's a number I won't go past. There's certain things that I won't go past. Those days are like leftovers or picking up, or somebody's picking, like something has to give. And that's the priority piece. But then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I have family time. If I so choose, like today's a Monday, I'll record, with you or do marketing. I'll do something with somebody else. I have a phone call later today about another possible collaboration in the community. But usually they're kind of off limits. And because I know those days are off limits, if anybody asks me, hey, how about this? Well, I don't, for clients, those are the days I don't work. I don't touch, sorry, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then if it's a family thing, if it's a school thing, if it's a doctor's appointment, I know what I have available. So what it does, it also takes off the pressure of like, I need to check my calendar. No, yes. I know it's on.
You know exactly what you're available for on each day.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because I mean, I'm sure you've heard me talk about boundaries and, the stress that women are under nowadays and how women are overgiving, overdoing, overworking. There's a lot of expectations on women in general, but also expectations that we put on ourselves, right? I mean, women get a degree, they get married, they have kids, they have a career. You're expected to be a great parent, a great partner, as well as take care of aging parents, especially in your culture and even mine as an Italian. I mean, we grew up, our family is very close knit. Sometimes that's nice. And sometimes it's like, no, we need space, right? And sometimes boundaries are very blurred or crossed, if you will. So, on that, like, where do you fit that in? Like I know you said you have 4 days where I almost feel like you have no choice but to have your schedule this way.
It took me a long time to get here. And everybody says, what's the perfect schedule? Again, it's really particular to you. So I've done where I didn't want to see more than 3 or 4 people a day. And when I did that, I had to work more days. And then I finally said, well, I need, like, my kids all have so many Fridays off. And I'm like, I want to be there on those days. And then it's like, well, hold on, they have these Fridays off and some Mondays, and then we can go away and take trips. I want that out too. So I always try to tailor, not just for them. And it's about my family. That's what's most important to me. And what I did see transparently while I was doing everything that I was doing, that it was coming at a cost. And I was trying to make all these things. And even to this day, my daughter's like, for me, because I always talk about, because I'm creating this space for the next generation, the people coming behind me. And she's like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, for you. So I can show them things. But if I'm not there to share in things, then what am I doing it for? And that's a big thing. I take them. So I spoke in California last year. I've spoken in Orlando twice, and I'm speaking in Texas next month. And I take them with me. Nice. I hosted events in the beginning of this year, it feels like last year, in Georgia and Tennessee. I took them with me. And they know, like, this is what mom does. And here's this travel is part of this. And I'm speaking. I want them to come along because I want them to see what's possible, but I still want them to do their own thing. I just want them to understand it could be anything. But you're right, culturally, I'm very fortunate that I have a more modern system at home because, and I'm very grateful for my life growing up. You know, my dad is a great provider, and my grandfather, all these things. Like my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom for most of her life. My mom's been very fortunate where it's always like, well, you don't really need to work. Like you can work, it would be helpful, but you know, you don't have to. But the point being is we take on these roles where we're expected. Like my dad never changed a diaper. Mm-hmm. My husband would stay up at night. My husband changes diapers. My husband will cook. My husband will pick up the kids. My husband will do homework. And again, I'm not saying anything bad about my dad. He showed up in different ways. Yeah. But I know that I couldn't successfully, especially when they were much younger, do what I do and have the businesses, multiple that I have, if I didn't have a support system that was a little different and less traditional. And listen, those are growing pains too, because it was kind of like, I know this is how you were raised and this is how I was raised, but this doesn't work for me. So I literally lovingly tell my husband, you know, when we've had our peak moments through transitions in life, and I'm like, you didn't marry a housewife. Yeah. You married an educated woman who's a business owner. If you want a housewife, don't know what to tell you. I never pretended to be one.
Right.
And I think it's being clear on who you are too as a person.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, because there's no right or wrong. And I have friends who they don't work and they're stay-at-home moms. Some of them homeschool. I mean, their life is not easy.
No, it's not. Oh my God, I could never do that.
Gosh, no.
At all.
And it's finding what works for you. But like what you're saying, it's having those conversations. And I think it is more difficult for somebody like you who culturally it was very different. And it's like culture shock. And even like, I don't know how your parents are around. I would imagine they support you and they're proud of you, but has there ever been any resistance about that?
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought this up. So I grew up, and again, love my family, but I remember seeing little things that I didn't like. I was I was a feminist in my house. Yeah. I'd be like, why can't the boys get their water? Why can't the boys pick up after themselves on the plate? And it was just kind of like an understood rule. And what I had to learn, this is the therapeutic part, right? Is I had to learn that worked for them. Mm-hmm. And they had an agreed system that whether or not they loved it or didn't love it, or I loved it or I didn't love it, that worked for them. So whatever my mom did and they agreed upon worked, because you know what? She works 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. So that was their kind of arrangement. I think everybody has their own. For me, it was growing up seeing that. And I remember saying, I'm marrying an American. Take care of my house by myself. So my husband was very well aware of that. I think we met in the middle, right? We definitely don't run like an American super modern house, but definitely not traditional. Yeah. And it was having those conversations. And let me tell you, when my parents come over, or my parents found out my husband was changing diapers, or he was cooking, or they see him with a mop, they're like, you're a bad wife. You're going to lose your husband. Oh no, yes, you're going to lose your husband. What kind of mother are you?
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. So this was deep and hard, Claudia. This wasn't anything, but again, I knew, and this goes to the part where you have to understand, and I really gift my clinical training on this. I know that I love coaching so much that sometimes I minimize how much of an impact my training has. Yep. To understand that is not what they're used to. Mm-hmm. That's what they fear. Those are their belief systems, and I have my own. And then it's having the confidence to say, well, that's how you did it. This is how I'm doing it. Your way's not wrong and my way's not wrong. Mm-hmm. But you have to respect my way. And that's hard for people. You know, the mom guilt people talk about all the time. Like even, I know you're always with your dog, right? Like if you leave your dog behind, you feel bad. It's the same thing, right? So like I'm working and I'm building this empire. I want to build this empire, but you know, I missed homework today. I missed this today. And those little moments. And if somebody catches you at the wrong time and they say something, then that's hard. So I'm not saying it's easy, because there were moments where I was doing a lot, and here come my parents, and working too much, your husband's picking them up and you're late working, and that's not good. That's not good for your marriage or as a mom, but it was what I needed to do for me and my career and my business.
Yeah. It is challenging though. And I know what you're saying. And I have definitely been self-reflecting on that myself, and I don't have kids obviously, but,
being a firm mom
is, and he is pretty high maintenance. So yes. And he's probably like, what do you mean I'm not a kid? He's listening to me right now. Yeah. I mean, my gosh, we've had a lot of issues with him. And, but even just being an entrepreneur, and my situation is not really traditional. I'm not married. I've had my partner for 15 something years, and we both work hard, and we often find it to be a challenge to even connect. And being an entrepreneur, being ambitious, it's definitely affected the relationship in some ways. And that's what we've both been self-reflecting a lot on just how we've put like our work at the forefront. So, I mean, I could see how culturally, like maybe family was such a priority, when it comes to my family and obviously your family. And yes, work is important, but it's like family should be at the top kind of a thing. So I can see where they're coming from and when they make those type of comments, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't sting.
And I think a lot of them are fear-based. I think that would be their fear. Like if I did what she was doing, what would happen? But again, it's knowing that what you want. I think always in everything, not just in business, but in life, knowing what is important to you and what you really want and what makes you feel whole and good. Once you have that, then people can say whatever they want to say. If you're grounded in what is meaningful to you, you figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy to ignore or not let outside voices influence you. That was definitely something even with my mom. And yeah, my mom always worked. She was a very safe job, like 9 to 5. I mean, when I was younger, she stayed at home, but then as my sister and I got older, she started working. And I remember telling her like, oh, I'm starting my own business. I'm going to be a health coach. She was like, what? Like, what the hell is that? And, how are you going to make money? It was all fear, like just projected onto me. And we could actually talk a little bit about like even the money piece, because I know that's something that you're really interested in. And we have entrepreneurs who listen, but I feel like money is just a sticky point for anybody, entrepreneur or not.
Absolutely.
I mean, and so many people stay in jobs that are secure because of that constant paycheck.
Gonna make me nauseous. Whenever I hear anybody miserable at work, I'm like, oh wait, let me help you.
Yes, me too. I'm like, I'm always looking at like, well, what are your strengths, and what can you do differently, and stop relying on this job, because you and I are obviously the same in that way. I didn't want to stay in that. I was not happy. I wanted to be able to control my own everything, my schedule, my time, what I did day to day. So
this is such a good point. So this is when I go back to we're cut from a certain cloth. I think it is, and again, I have the same conversation when people struggle with anxiety or ADHD or depression, and they're trying to explain to their loved ones. If somebody doesn't feel it or have that, it is almost impossible for them to grasp it. And I think we're so, as entrepreneurs, so different in the risk taking and this is conventional and it feels safe, but safe almost feels like it's holding me back. Mm-hmm. And everybody doesn't feel that sense of like, no, I feel unsafe feeling boxed in. Right. And so it's hard. So I'm trying to figure out a way to set up the answer, because I really feel it depends on the person. There are some people that their cortisol levels would shift and they probably have a heart attack and a stroke if they ever had to leave something that was consistent. Then again, I know that there's illness. I have a client now that's been working for a company for like 15 or 20 years, and they're having massive layoffs. Do you think she feels secure?
Right.
People always feel like things are safe. They're not. Look at what happened during COVID.
Sense of security.
Absolutely. But it's what are you really holding on to?
Yeah.
So I think for people, it's if you're that unhappy at work and the stability that you're used to is comfort. Mm-hmm. It's like having a blanket. So it's your comfort blanket. But if you're unhappy, what are you holding on to?
Yeah, I feel the same. But it's fear on both sides. It's fear of the unknown and what all the
Absolutely.
what ifs. And I think there's such a mindset shift there. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy by any means or telling people, I think I talked about this recently on another episode. I'm not saying like, go quit your job, but life is short. I agree with you 100% on that. And like, how are we spending our time and our energy? And if you're just working a job that you go to every day, that you're miserable, it causes you stress, it causes you anxiety. What do you think that's doing physically to your health?
Ready? So my line is at what cost? So you have this job at what cost? And then this is where you roll in. What about cortisol levels? What about, look at my patients now and they're getting a little older. And I'm like, you can have a stroke or a heart attack. At what cost are you holding on to this job that makes you miserable or this relationship that makes you unhappy? How does that affecting everything else? So now you're tired and you're depleted, right? Here you take over. You're not as present for your family or for your children. You're not showing up in the best way. You're irritable. You're tired. You're exhausted. You take naps. You can't be present. So what quality of life are you living?
Yeah.